is the new 2025 Jeep Wagoneer S, and it's Jeep's first fully electric vehicle. But it's not very Jeep. With an amazing 600 horsepower and smooth, sleek, curvy styling, this is certainly no Wrangler or boxy old-school Cherokee. Today, I'm going to review the new Wagoneer S and show you the quirks and features of Jeep's first effort in the brave new EV world. Before we get started, are you ready for your next cool car? Sell your enthusiast car on Cars and Bids. Trading in your car to dealers means you aren't getting market value for your car, leaving you with less cash for your next fun car. Just look at our recent sales of these cool cars compared to current trade-in value. This is a trade-in offer, and this was the Cars and Bids result. This is a trade-in offer, and this was the Cars and Bids result. This is the trade-in offer, and this is the Cars and Bids result. Get started now on carsandbids.com. Sell on Cars and Bids and join the best community to sell your enthusiast car. All right, time for the quirks and features of the Wagoneer S. Starting with probably the biggest quirk of all, which is its name, Wagoneer S. Not to be confused with the Jeep Wagoneer, which is completely different. That is a massive, blocky, boxy, three-row SUV with a big gas-guzzling engine. This, the Wagoneer S, is a small, sleek, fully electric crossover with two-row seating. They have absolutely nothing in common, and yet their names are distinguished by one mere letter, S. Why did they name them so closely? I have absolutely no idea. This is Chrysler we're talking about, but there's the Wagoneer and the Wagoneer S, and they are completely separate. Now, let's talk through a couple of quick basics on the Wagoneer S. Like I said, fully electric, Jeep's first, and it has 600 horsepower. That is a real figure. All-wheel drive is standard, max range is about 310 miles, and 0 to 60 is in 3.5 seconds, which is obviously fast. Like I said, mid-size-ish in sizing, actually on the smaller end of the mid-size SUV scale, two-row seating and shorter in length than a Toyota Highlander or Jeep's own Grand Cherokee. On paper, it all seems pretty good, although pricing is a sticking point. It's high. Right now, the base model being launched is the limited trim, which starts around $67,000. Or you can get the launch edition, that's this, which starts around $72,000. Big money for a mid-size, fully electric Jeep crossover. So let's talk quirks. I already mentioned the name. The other big quirk of the Wagoneer S is that the design actually hides a teardrop shape. You know how most electric vehicles have that sort of teardrop tapering off roofline, like the Model Y and the Mustang Mach-E? Well, this doesn't look like it does. You look at it on the side, it looks like a flat roof, like a Jeep, boxy and strong and sturdy, but most of the rear is actually just optical illusion. You look at it from straight in the back and you can see it is a teardrop shape, and the flat roofline on the sides is mostly just there to be supporting the spoiler, which is huge and comes off the top of the car and kind of hides the overall teardrop shape, which it does have, even though it doesn't look like it. Now, also on the outside, let's talk about the design. Frankly, I think it looks nice. It's a good-looking vehicle, certainly not ugly, but a little bit anonymous. It doesn't scream $70,000, nice, cool, special SUV. It's a little derivative and kind of dull. In fact, aside from the faux teardrop shape on the outside, the only real quirk out here is, well, the hidden Wagoneer S badge at the very back, as you can see right here, kind of neatly integrated, and up front you have a full light bar going over the entire front grille assembly between the headlights, which I guess is kind of cool and interesting, although not particularly exciting. Not too quirky, kind of generic on the outside. Moving inside inside. It's definitely more interesting and unusual in here than it is on the outside. Let's start with just turning on this vehicle. There's a large central on-off button. You can see here, you push that, it turns on, and then right below there you have a dial to switch into gear, obviously park, reverse, neutral, drive. Below that, you have a switch that lets you choose between various different off-road or on-road modes, sand, snow. This is still, after all, a Jeep, and apparently it has some off-road capabilities. Now, directly above all of this stuff in the center control stack, you have a lower screen that is just for the climate control system. And frankly, this screen is actually kind of an unusual and quirky implementation. You can use this screen if you want to adjust various climate control functions, like where the air is blowing, the fan speed, the temperature, all that stuff. But there is also a rather prominent button on here marked Screen Off. You can push that and it turns off the screen entirely in case you're overloaded with screen. Now, the interesting thing is the climate controls are still visible along the bottom of the screen. So you can still adjust the climate controls to just not using the big climate control screen. You can turn it off if you don't want screens everywhere all in your face, and you still have access to your climate controls. Now, also on this screen, you can see there is a driver massage and a passenger massage app button that you can push to turn on your massaging front seats, which is obviously a nice luxury touch to have. Now, interestingly, and actually nicely, the heated and cooled seats are not integrated into this climate screen. Instead, they have their own special little touch buttons on the left and right of the main center screen. Left side, obviously, for the driver side, which includes a heated steering wheel button, and then on the right side, you have your passenger heated and cooled seat buttons. These are distinct from the climate control screen, which is kind of cool. Now, also on the side of the center screen, you have this button here, which turns off the main infotainment screen if you want. You can press that, turn it off completely, and then it just displays like the date and the time. So again, you can go completely screenless on the upper screen as well, which is also kind of a nice touch. Even though this is a modern electric vehicle with screens everywhere, it is designed to be used with fewer screens if you want, which is kind of nice to see for people who don't want to go screen overload. Further proof of that is directly below the main center screen, you have a row of controls here that are not screen based for some kind of basic vehicle functions. You can turn on or off your parking sensors here, for example. You can turn on your auto parking system, your lane keep, your traction control. You have a few buttons that are separate from the screen, so you don't have to dive deep into menus in order to find and use them. Now, one other interesting button in this row below the center screen, over on the left, you have a camera button. You push that and it instantly pops up the camera system, which is nice to see. Easy access to the cameras, so if you're off-roading in your Jeep or just trying to park it in a tight spot, you can easily pull up all your cameras, high resolution, see them all right there, which is pretty cool. And another great function of the camera system in the Wagoneer S is that you have blind spot cameras. Turn on your turn signal, and you can see the blind spot camera will turn on in the direction that you're signaling to show what's in your blind spot. And of course, it works the other direction as well. Turn on your signal, the blind spot camera pops up, and you can see what's there. Now, this is a great feature to have, shockingly useful and helpful to make lane changes, especially on the freeway. I do wish that these cameras would display in the gauge cluster screen, which is more directly in your line of sight than in the center screen, but it's nice to have them at all. I'm not going to complain. Hyundais and Kias have had this for a while. Tesla just started offering it. I wish more manufacturers would, and it's nice to see it integrated into the Wagoneer S. Now, beyond the camera system, overall, the infotainment, I would say, is good, but not at the very best level of great. It actually is well laid out, intuitive, smartly designed, but it's laggier than I would expect that it would be. You tap something and sometimes you're waiting up to a second or two for the screen to actually change, which is kind of unacceptable in this world of Tesla infotainment that changes quickly, and of course smartphones, which are also instantaneous. It's a little bit laggy here, but overall, generally a well-designed system that works well, just maybe wish it were a little bit quicker and more responsive. Now, there are a lot more screens to cover in this car than just the two in the center. One is the rear view mirror, which you can see right now is a rear view mirror, but if I flip this switch, it becomes a camera showing me what's behind me. I've mentioned in previous videos, I love this feature. I love how well it works. It's wonderfully integrated and it's very safe, because if you have a bunch of people and stuff in your car, you don't have to try to look through them in the mirror. You just see what's behind you no matter matter what. You also have a screen over on the passenger side of the dashboard, a dedicated screen just for the passenger that you turn on by pressing this little button on the right side of the center control stack buttons. You turn on the passenger screen, and interestingly, it's not just a duplicate of what you have in the center screen like it is in so many other vehicles. Instead, it's more of an entertainment system for the passenger that they can watch something even while you're driving down the road. Now, the driver's angle makes it impossible to see this screen. So if the passenger's watching a movie, the driver can't look over and watch along with the passenger. It's just for the front passenger, and it's nice to have for longer trips. Your last important screen dimension in here is the gauge cluster screen, which, like in other Jeep vehicles, is really excellent. You can make a lot of adjustments and configurations to it to pull up exactly the information and displays that you want to see. Music, your vehicle range, trip odometer, all that sort of stuff, your phone, you can all pull it up here. Although it's worth pointing out, I can't find a full screen map setting like I've seen in previous Jeep Chrysler models before. It's a little disappointing not to see that in here, but you do have a very configurable, easy to use gauge cluster that gives you a lot of good information that you can really personalize well. Now, beyond all of your screens and tech in this car, a few other interesting items worth pointing out. For one, there's no traditional door handle in here. Instead, to get out, you press this button and it electronically pops the door open, and then you climb out. Just in case that fails, you do have a backup manual door handle release. You can see it's right here. It's not easy to see. It's pretty well integrated into the door, but it is there just in case your electronic popper isn't working. Also interesting in this interior, the climate control vents have been radically de-emphasized like a lot of cars are doing. They're up here and at the top of the dashboard, but you really don't see them prominently. So many previous vehicles in years past had big old climate control vents right in the center. That's no longer the trend. They're getting smaller and smaller. They still work well, but they're not very big. And also worth pointing out on the dashboard, you can see very noticeably the ambient light that goes all the way across the dashboard and onto the door panels. This is a very obvious feature intended to set the mood in here, and you can adjust the ambient lighting color in the infotainment system to be precisely what you want. Now, with all of this said, the full tour of the front done, I must say, I don't really think this looks like a $72,000 car interior. It's nice, there's good tech, there's good stuff in here, but at this price point, it just seems a little strong considering how it looks in here and considering other luxury vehicles that are at this price point or close to it. It's just maybe a little too high price to justify the quality of this interior. And next up, we move on to the back seat in the Wagoneer S, and there's some good and some bad back here, but mostly good, and that's especially true of rear seat room. I'm a tall person. I got the front seat where I would sit. I got good room for knees, legs, hip, head. It is surprisingly roomy back here, particularly for a vehicle this size. I mentioned this is on the smaller end of the midsize SUV space. I'm not used to having this much space in the back of a vehicle this size, but it really does deliver well. That's one of the benefits of a full electric vehicle. There's no giant engine up front that pushes the whole interior back, so you can expand the interior a little bit and get more passenger space, and that's clearly what they've done here. And there are some nice amenities back here. You have heated rear seats, as you can see, but also cooled rear seats, which is uncommon, but a nice feature to have here. You also have rear climate vents, as you can see, for climate control in the back, and power ports, 2 USB-C, but also a household-style power port, which is really nice to have in the cabin. So you can plug in stuff while you're driving along, charge a computer. It's really nice to have that here as opposed to just another USB-C or a cigarette lighter style port. That is a cool feature. With that said, there are a couple of interesting drawbacks back here. One is you don't have any cup holders built into the door panel on either side in back, which is disappointing because that means the only cup holders you have back here come when you drop the center armrest. There are cup holders in here, but that means you can't have cups in back and also 3 people sitting across in back. And that's disappointing because there is good rear seat space in this vehicle, and because it's electric, there's no big hump in the floor that steals middle passenger space. So this is actually a pretty usable middle seat that you might want to use, but you can't if you want to bring cups in the back. It kind of limits the usability of that middle seat, even though it's actually pretty usable for a middle seat. The other interesting thing back here, like the front doors, the rear one
ones have electric popper buttons. You push and they open, but the rear doors do not have a manual latch release backup. You only get that up front. So if you're in an accident and you're not sure, you can't get out, the door popper isn't working, it's nice to have that manual backup, but unfortunately it doesn't seem like you have it back here. At least I can't find it anywhere, and you probably wouldn't in an accident situation either. That would be a nice backup to have. But overall, almost completely positive in the back seat. And that's also true in the cargo area. Open up the power tailgate and you can see there is pretty good space back here. Again, for a midsize SUV, you got a big, long, flat load floor where you can put a lot of stuff. It is slightly impeded by the teardrop shape of this vehicle. So if you have something taller, big box, you might not be able to fit it in back, but most things that most people put in their cargo areas will fit back here, and it really is a good sized cargo area for this size vehicle. And there's extra storage space underneath. You lift up the floor and you can see some extra space under here where you can put more stuff. With that said, a couple of drawbacks worth pointing out. There's no netted small cargo item storage on the side. A lot of other cars have that for smaller, fragile items. You don't want them rolling around. You don't get it in the Wagoneer S on either side. And you also don't have a household power port back here. You do have a cigarette lighter style port back here, which is nice to have, and you have that household one in the center, but it would be good to have another one in back. Still, not exactly a fatal flaw, and overall, a surprisingly large and good cargo area. One other interesting thing worth pointing out is the location of the button to close the tailgate. Every other brand puts that button on the back of the tailgate itself, but here, in Chryslers and Jeeps, it's integrated inside the cargo area. You push here, and that closes the tailgate. This is beneficial for shorter people who may not be able to reach all the way up to the top of that tailgate, especially if your hands are full. It's nice to have the button right here. You push it, and the tailgate goes down. And finally, we move up to the front cargo area, which is actually rather large, as you can see. There's decent space in here for storage. You can get some larger items in here. It's refreshing because a lot of EVs are actually ditching this front cargo compartment, or sometimes it's really small, but here it's decent size and you can get relatively large items up front. Actually, the quirkiest thing about the front cargo compartment is accessing it. To get in, there's a button to the left of the steering wheel. You can push right here. It pops open the hood and you can get into the front, or if you want to go the old-fashioned way, you go a couple of inches down into the driver's footwell and there's a latch, but it's not a latch, it's a fabric loop that you pull, and that also accesses the front cargo compartment. I'm not sure if that's regulatory, they have to have something there, but it's interesting to see two redundant controls so close together, one of which is very nice, a consumer-friendly button, and the other is this chintzy loop that you pull. Either way, you get up here and you can put stuff up front. But all of those quirks and features aside, now it's time to get behind the wheel of a 600 horsepower electric Jeep. Let's see how this drives. All right, driving the Wagoneer S. So I've been driving this thing around for a couple of days now, and I gotta say, despite its name, it really more reminds me of a Grand Cherokee. To be honest, it kind of seems like an electric Grand Cherokee, at least from a driving position point of view. Not when you consider the crazy power output, the styling, but from sitting here, from the overall size, from the general feel of this interior, it feels like a lot of Grand Cherokee. And honestly, an electric Grand Cherokee is something that I think would be appealing to a lot of people, particularly when you throw in as much power as this car has. I think the drawback starts to come when you talk about price point, and this is where it is, 60s, 70s, thousands. I mean, that's a very, very big number and puts it a lot more expensive than a Grand Cherokee. The EV thing is a benefit for some people, but I don't really know if it's like a dramatic benefit that would be worth spending that much money, and so I think a lot of these cars are going to go out the door with significant incentives. But from a driving perspective, there are some things that I really like here. One is just fast. I mean, it's just plain fast. I'm actually surprised that it doesn't have more power because it feels like it does. It is just a really quick vehicle. You step on it and there's a weird lag when you're at highway speeds, like an engine spooling up, which I actually kind of like. It feels more natural to me, but once it gets going, it is just absolutely tossing you forward. It's also smooth. Like, it's a smooth and comfortable ride in here. It feels nice. It's a nice place to spend time. You get wind rush and wind noise when you're going real speeds, but now here I'm driving 65 in a 65 zone. It feels comfortable and calm. You know, I don't really hear much on the outside of vehicles driving by, of my own stuff, including tire noise, which is good. They've done a good job neutralizing that, which can be harder on electric vehicles since there's no engine noise to drown it out. The driving position is good, despite kind of the swept back look of this car and sort of the lower look. Compared to something like a Grand Cherokee, it actually does feel fairly tall when you're sitting in it. Steering and handling is pretty much exactly as I would expect, which is to say secure, predictable, fine, not sporty. Despite the massive power and the massive acceleration here, you're not going to get like really impressive steering handling. It doesn't feel like a hardcore performance car from that perspective, and it shouldn't. I mean, I think most people aren't really going to be interested in that. I think that the party trick of electric cars in a lot of cases is that power output, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're looking to compromise ride quality by getting something that handles particularly well. So you want to show people the acceleration. That doesn't necessarily mean you want to be, you know, bumping around everywhere to go around curves quickly, and this doesn't do that. It certainly feels more athletic than, say, a Grand Cherokee, but it's not what I would call like tremendously sporty feeling when you're going around corners. Overall, I think there's actually a lot to like here. I'm kind of surprised because Chrysler has not really fully greatly committed to the EV thing, and it seems like, I don't want to say they're doing it just to comply with regulations, but other brands have definitely gone more all in on EVs. Chrysler recently announced that they're canceling a different one of their EVs. They haven't, you know, some brands have gone full line EVs. This is what we're going to do, and it hasn't really been Chrysler's thing. I wasn't really expecting, as a result, like a really well-developed, great vehicle, but this is actually, they're fairly competent in a lot of ways. I think it drives well, it's fast, it's fun. I think the tech is pretty good. I think there's a lot of great benefits here. I think the price tag is high. When you consider the rivals that are in the segment, and especially the rivals at this price point, you're starting to get into kind of the BMW iX vehicles like that have really nice interiors and higher end brand names. The Jeep brand is good, but it's not good enough to support this vehicle at this price point, even considering some of the nice benefits that it has. You're just not going to quite get there with a Jeep. And frankly, though this interior is nice and the tech is good and all that, it's just not quite supportive at this price point. I think with the right incentives, the right lease deals, etc., this car does become pretty attractive, and I suspect that it will be an attractive buy on the used market as it depreciates. But it seems like it's a little bit high priced. Nonetheless, it is a surprisingly competent vehicle. I'm surprised. It drives well. I would be happy to drive one of these things around, but maybe not at the $70,000 price point like this is. And so that's the new 2025 Jeep Wagoneer S. There's a lot to like here, with attractive, smooth styling, a nice interior, good technology, big power, but pricing is high, the market is cooling on EVs, and there's a lot of competition. This is well done, actually, but my guess is it's going to be a hard sell with the Jeep brand name at this price point. Anyway, now it's time to give the Wagoneer S a DougScore. And the DougScore is here, 62 out of 100, which puts the Jeep Wagoneer S here against rivals last in this group. I actually found the Wagoneer S to be a pretty competent car, but it's hard to imagine buying it given the competition, which virtually always delivers the same or more for less money, and that's before you factor in potential Chrysler Jeep reliability issues. I liked this car more than I expected, and its DougScore is only a point or two off some really impressive vehicles, but I'd like it a lot more if the starting price was about 25% lower, even if that meant sacrificing some power and performance.